All right, welcome. Welcome to this month's CA Community of Practice, Cyber Defense, Student Competitions, CTFs. I'm Dan Manson. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Brad Wolfenden. I've known Brad for years now, and I believe that I was able to persuade Brad to do the first cyber competition in an esports arena back in 2018. We had kind of a pros versus Joes event in the Luxor HyperX Esports Arena. And then the next year, we were able to do something national called Wicked Six. To me, a competition should be as exciting as watching an esport. And Brad has shared that passion with me. And Brad has gone much further in the past few years with the U.S. Cyber Games, and now we have an international cybersecurity championship, country versus country or region versus region. And so I know you're going to enjoy the talk today because we have a pathway that goes from middle school to the Olympic level. And it is one of the coolest things I've seen develop. And Brad's been instrumental to this. So Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Brad Wolfenden, and very much looking forward to presenting to you all this afternoon. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. And that should be coming through for you all. And you'll see that.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Cool. Deep, hello, from one of our season 3 coaches and mentors. Wonderful. So let's get started. I like to start all of my presentations with, especially when I'm speaking to a new audience, with a little bit of a success story. And this one specifically comes from one of our season 2 athletes, a young gentleman named Isaiah Halsey. Isaiah was just wrapping up his high school career when he joined the U.S. Cyber Games program. And I'll let you all kind of take a minute just to read the quote from Isaiah on the screen. And the reason I like to start with this quote from Isaiah, a couple of reasons. Isaiah was a complete underdog in terms of joining the U.S. Cyber Games program. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about kind of our target demographic and who we are and what we do and the types of young people that become part of the U.S. Cyber Games family. But when Isaiah came to us, they had shared that they were in a pretty rough spot in their journey. Wrapping up college, or rather high school, getting ready to go to college, New York City resident, wasn't totally sure, what their future held, came to the U.S. Cyber Games program with very little experience in cybersecurity, and became one of our pipeline program athletes. We'll get into the pipeline program further into this presentation. But since having joined our pipeline program, not only has Isaiah been a phenomenal contributor to the U.S. Cyber Games community, but has also landed their first job with DHS CISA. So great way to start the presentation. We're really all about creating a community. We'll get into some components of what that looks like. But I think we're all here for the same reason. We're here to impact lives. We're here to create opportunities. And we're here really to bring new and different folks into the world of cybersecurity through various means, largely competitions. So a little bit about me. My name is Brad Wolfenden. I'm the director of cyber sports with Cat's Eye Play Cyber. The Play Cyber organization under Cat's Eye is responsible for the U.S. Cyber Games program. Dr. Manson alluded a little bit to how we met. I was working for an organization called Circadence about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe longer than that. That was really where my career in cybersecurity got started, working to kind of reimagine cybersecurity training platform that was originally designed for the U.S. Armed Forces into one that could support academic institutions and learning in the classroom. We used that to host one of the first cyber competitions in an esports arena in Las Vegas, that was called Game of Titans. From there, worked for several other pretty large government contractors, largely on the training and exercise side. Everyone from state and local governments to multinational exercises was sort of in our wheelhouse there. And in addition to what I do professionally, I do volunteer my time for various organizations such as the Tortora Breda Institute, former co-chair of the NICE Cybersecurity Skills Competitions Community of Interest, sat on the Microsoft Education Partner Advisory Council, and have held several other roles similar to that. My contact information will be on the last slide when we get to questions and answers at the end. So feel free to jot that down or just wait until the end. All right, so for today, I'm coming into this a little bit blind, so hopefully this can be interactive. You're certainly welcome to come off mute, use the chat box. I'll do my best to follow things that you're typing into chat. But I have prepared about 40 minutes or so of slides to kind of talk you through the following agenda. So I'll give you a little bit of overview of the program, US Cyber Games specifically, talk some about our objectives and expectations, walk you through what a season of the US Cyber Games looks like, and then wrap things up with some conversation around the International Cybersecurity Championship and the big sort of competition that we're preparing the US Cyber team for. And of course, hopefully there'll be some time for questions and answers. So if that's not what you were expecting, I'm sorry, but hopefully it'll still be engaging. And like I said, please feel free to ask questions as we get through the content. In terms of program overview, I always like to start by kind of introducing the faces behind the US Cyber Games. So Jessica Gulick, that might be a name some of you are familiar with. Jessica is the founder and CEO of Cat's Eye Play Cyber. She is also the commissioner of the US Cyber Games. I report directly to Jess. My main responsibility as the director of cyber sports is oversight of the US Cyber Games program. So that's everything from identifying and onboarding our coaches and mentors to working with our sponsors and partners to facilitating all communications with our athletes, overseeing the planning and execution of our training and development, etc. Miss Rachel Skillman is our director of technology, security, and product. So she assists the program by onboarding a lot of our platform partners, as well facilitating any sort of help and support athletes or coaches may need with the resources that we provide to them as part of the US Cyber Games program experience. And then finally, we have Beth Mayhew. Beth is our director of marketing. So a lot of our social media activity, a lot of our sponsor outreach and communications, a lot of our e-newsletters to athletes and fans, etc., all run through Beth. We couldn't do what we do without our coaching staff. So the individuals that you see on the screen here are the Season 3 US Cyber Team coaches and mentors. All of these individuals are volunteers. We do not pay our coaches or mentors for their contributions to the program. But like I said, we could not do what we do without them. And I think it's helpful for you to see kind of the breakdown of how we structure the coaching staff, so you can kind of get a feel for the types of competitions we're preparing them for and the other types of programming that make up the US Cyber Games season. The individuals that are in bold on this screen are returning coaches and or mentors. So it kind of gives you an idea in terms of, we like to keep some of that continuity with the program. Coaches coming back, they have the relationships with the athletes, they know what we do programmatically, and then we also like to bring in some fresh blood. This year's coaching staff is significantly expanded, specifically in the pipeline program area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we've also added another component to the program this year around careers and leadership, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as well. One interesting aspect of our coaching staff is we do have the junior tech mentor role. And the junior tech mentor role is filled by former athletes that have aged out of the program. So all of the individuals that you see listed as a junior tech mentor were part of the Season 1 or Season 2 US Cyber team. And they have become ineligible to participate in our Season 3 programming due to the age requirements put on by our European partners out of ANISA. So head coach, Dr. Josh Brunty. Dr. Josh Brunty is faculty at Marshall University. Our assistant head coach, Ms. Georgia Weedman. We have an assistant head coach, Dr. Dane Brown from the Naval Academy. The two types of competitions primarily that we're preparing our athletes for, CTF coaching lead Jacob Elliott handles all of our Jeopardy style CTF kind of planning and development. And then on the red versus blue or attack defense side, a gentleman named Christopher Haller oversees that for season 3. The pipeline program, like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is a huge area of emphasis as we move into season 3. Really kind of reimagining the pipeline program, not just growing it from an athlete perspective, the number of athletes that we're bringing into the pipeline program, but also in terms of the impact that we hope that that program will have. All of the individuals that you see on this screen, as I mentioned, they do volunteer their time, but they all play significant roles in everything from helping us develop new CTF challenges to designing red versus blue competition environments. Some of them are helping the program by delivering lectures, technical lectures, lectures on careers and leadership, for example, ethics or how to find your first job, various approaches to leadership and what that means, what that can look like, how you develop those skills. And then the observers that support staff, they really support the program through things like athlete interviews and conducting those. We have athlete observations where athletes are solving challenges in real time, and our observers and support staff are kind of watching over their shoulder, taking some notes, asking them questions and things like that. All right, so the program overall was founded by Cat's Eye. Cat's Eye is a small women-owned business out of the DC metro area. All of this came to be through an opportunity to collaborate with the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. During my time as co-chair with NICE, overseeing their competitions, at the time it was a subgroup, now it's a community of interest. Bill Newhouse, some of you may know Bill, was our government liaison there. There was an inquiry that came out of the European Union for some expansion to what was and still is the European Cybersecurity Challenge, to grow that effort internationally. And it was a very early email exploring whether or not the US would be interested in participating in that. Of course, the answer was yes. There was some funding that was identified through NIST, and a grant was submitted and eventually awarded to essentially develop the US Cyber Games program. So our mission, as clearly stated here on the screen, is to bring talented cybersecurity athletes, coaches, and industry leaders together to build an elite US cyber team for global competition. Some of our main objectives and priorities. Number one, first and foremost, we do wear the red, white, and blue into international cybersecurity competitions. That carries a lot of weight, and that means that not only do we want to perform well in competitions, but we also want the team to represent the US with integrity, with good sportsmanship, and with plenty of diversity that reflects our nation. Another goal of ours is to define a cyber athlete, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on one of the upcoming slides. Of course, we're recruiting and training top cyber talent from diverse backgrounds. We can talk a little bit more about how we do recruit our athletes. As a collaborative agreement partner of NIST and the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, we do map and align the majority of our training and development and competition scenarios or challenges to the NICE framework. A big goal of ours is, of course, workforce development, and a big part of workforce development is career placement. And so we work closely with our partners and sponsors to connect US Cyber Games program participants to various careers and or mentorship opportunities. And then as critical players in the international community, we do collaborate significantly on cybersecurity competitions, games, and workforce development initiatives across the globe. So a little bit about ANISA. I've rattled off that acronym a couple of times. ANISA is the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. Some of you may be familiar with them. For the last 9 or 10 years, ANISA has run the European Cybersecurity Challenge. that was really designed for the 22, I believe it's 22 member states of the EU. Each of them would send their own team to compete in the ECSC, European Cybersecurity Challenge, and the winning nation would take home the trophy. That was strictly a Jeopardy style CTF. Of course, when the US was approached by ANISA to grow that program from European centric into an international competition, we were thrilled about that. We suggested that we expand the competition to capture not just the Jeopardy style CTF, but also a red versus blue or attack defense side of things, to really kind of round out some of the skill sets that were being tested from the athletes participating in the event. The second ever international games was held just this past summer. Some of my final slides are going to cover that. There were approximately 84 countries, 87 countries that participated in that across 8 teams. Of course, when we are contributing to the international community through cybersecurity competitions, games, and other workforce development initiatives, certainly focus is on educational lines, positive experience. Workforce development is kind of the leading cause behind all of this, and leading by example, being collaborative, respecting stakeholders, etc., is important. Okay, so I mentioned on an earlier slide the objective or goal to sort of define a cyber athlete. I don't think this is a new term for probably any of you on the call. If it is, feel free to stop me and we can have a conversation about it. But a big component of the US Cyber Games is the fusion of cybersecurity competitions with esports and athletics. What we found is that when you start to bring together some of these esports concepts, the idea of athletics and seasons and things like that to cybersecurity competitions, we can start to engage new and different populations. Those dinner table conversations with parents, engaging counselors and educators, talking to sponsors and partners, they get it. It's not a secret for anyone on this call. Careers in cybersecurity can be somewhat intimidating for folks that don't understand what a day in the life of a cyber professional looks like. And so when we can start to talk about things like seasons, when we can start to talk through live streaming our competitions, talking about the tested skills from various CTF challenges or what's happening in a red versus blue competition as those things relate to your everyday life, that enables those conversations, and we do find ourselves more able to bring in new and different populations. Of course, along with that, educating the broader community on the importance of cybersecurity. Again, that comes back to talking about why it matters, when someone's identifying a brute force attack, or why it matters when someone is able to reverse engineer some malware and identify some attribution for that piece of malware, whatever the case may be. Certainly part of defining a cyber athlete comes with athletes have fans, and part of fandom is creating that ecosystem. So not just fans, not just athletes, but also coaches, mentors, technology and platform providers, etc., are all a huge piece of all of that. We're building a pipeline, much like any athletics program. When you're looking at whether it's professional baseball, if it's football, if it's basketball, they have AAA, single A, double A in the baseball world. They have affiliate leagues in basketball. They have college football where athletes are now able to accept payments and sponsors and things like that. Similarly, building that pipeline of skills, I think that's a common shared initiative for many of you all on the phone here today that are influential in planning and executing various cybersecurity competitions. That pathway is important for the cyber athlete themselves. Of course, they want to see where that next step is. There's lots of great, there's Cyber Patriot and NCL, and there's CCDC and many others, Pico CTF. Ultimately, the further we can expand sort of that pathway and that vision, the better. And then, no secret, again, the soft skills that are certainly demanded through team-based competitions are massively important to producing cyber professionals. When we're speaking with our partners, with our sponsors, and when we're speaking with our athletes and our coaches and our mentors, really highlighting the teamwork, the communication, the leadership, all of those things that are crucial to being an effective cybersecurity professional are also crucial to the world of athletics. And so you can start to see some of that golden thread kind of coming through cyber competitions, esports, and athletics. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop there and see if there are any questions, just sort of kind of on the background of the program after a little bit of an overview there. Okay. None heard. All right, so moving forward, kind of talking more about the nitty-gritty of the US Cyber Games program. And I apologize, this is a little more blurry than I expected it to be when I pulled the image into a slide. But wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background on some of our diversity metrics and how we've grown from season 1 through season 2. We're still at the early stages of season 3, so I don't quite have this data for season 3 yet. But season 1, this was obviously our inaugural season. We had just shy of 700 athletes register for the first phase of our season. And I'll talk a little bit more about how the season rolls out. But ultimately, the first phase of the season is what we call the US Cyber Open. It's a 10-day long CTF event, open to anyone and everyone, regardless of age, regardless of citizenship status. And for our season 1 program, we had 688 athletes register and participate from 43 states and DC. You can see here that of those 688 athletes, approximately 1/3, 33% were people of color. And our gender breakdown was approximately 70% male, 23% female, and 7% prefer not to say. We then, in the season, we moved from the US Cyber Open into what we call the US Cyber Combine. The Combine is an invite-only aspect, and I'll break that down for you in some later slides, where we identified 75 athletes from their participation in the US Cyber Open, as well as the application that they submitted, and we invited them into the Combine. Of those 75 athletes, 35% were people of color, 74% male, 23% female, and 3% prefer not to say. From there, we then drafted our first ever US Cyber team. That was 20 athletes, plus what we had called wild cards or alternates. There were 5 alternates or wild cards. And then our first ever pipeline program was filled with 12 athletes. Season 2 saw some pretty solid growth, just about doubled, a little over doubled in terms of the number that we welcomed into the Open. We did then reach all 50 states plus DC, saw a slight uptick in terms of our diversity demographics. 40% of our 1,470 athletes identified as people of color, 65% identified as male, 25% female, and 1% non-binary, 9% prefer not to say. Then we moved into the Combine, and similarly, again, invite-only aspects. We did grow the Combine invites from 75 to 85 from year 1 to year 2. 41% people of color, 74% male, 20% female, 6% prefer not to say. Our second ever US Cyber team, the season 2 team, was 30 athletes, 10 of which were returning athletes, 20 athletes were brand new. And by returning, that just means they were part of the season 1 team, 20 were new, including 2 of the 30 athletes were individuals from the season 1 pipeline program. The season 2 pipeline program then featured 20 athletes. All right, so this is kind of the timeline for what a typical season looks like. As I mentioned, we start every season with what we call the US Cyber Open. 10-day long CTF events. We run that out of our own CTFD instance. All of the challenges are built by our coaches, mentors, or former athletes. And those are delivered across 5 core categories. So we really focus in on crypto, forensics, pwn or binary exploitation, reverse engineering, and web. Occasionally, there's some miscellaneous challenges in there. You might see things like recon networking. You might see a little bit of cloud or mobile, IoT, those kinds of things. But primarily, we focus on those 5 core categories, and that's the US Cyber Open. The US Cyber Open is available to anyone and everyone. As I mentioned before, there are no restrictions in terms of age. There are no restrictions in terms of nationality or citizenship status. Aside from the fact that as a federally funded program, we cannot accept participation from any of the countries that are on the sanctioned list as determined by the federal government. We then move from the US Cyber Open into the US Cyber Combine. The US Cyber Combine is about an 8-week program. It is invite only, and this is where we do start to apply some of the competition regulations set forth by ANISA. So the competition regulations primarily are age-based. You have to be 15 to 25 years old. And then you also have to be a citizen or naturalized citizen of the country or region in which you compete for. So we move from the open, we identify the athletes, we welcome them into the combine. And this is a much more structured training, assessment, and evaluation process. I have a slide that'll kind of break down what that looks like exactly, but this is our time really to get to know the athletes from a couple of different perspectives, not just their technical skills, but we're also reviewing their applications. We're interviewing each of those athletes. We're putting in front of them individual work, small group work, team-based stuff. So we're looking at a lot of different sides of the athletes to kind of determine not just their technical skill, but also their commitment to the program, their eagerness, willingness to learn, and lots of other kind of factors as well. We then move to Draft Day. Draft Day is held the Monday of Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. We do this in partnership with NICE. It is both an in-person event as well as live streamed. And this year that will happen on Monday, October 16th from the DC metro area. Ultimately, on draft day, we're identifying 2 groups of individuals. We are selecting the US Cyber team for that season. So this year will be the season 3 team. We're looking to draft 30 athletes for the season 3 US Cyber team. And then we will also be identifying the pipeline program athletes. And as you saw, year 1, that was 12 athletes. Year 2, that was 20. This year, we hope to have 40 athletes accept their invitation into the pipeline program. All of this is in preparation of the International Cybersecurity Competition, which for next summer has not been confirmed. Good question, Jake. Yeah. So the ICC for next year has not been confirmed. At this point, we expect to have a date and location decided by the end of September. We are in talks with both the Asian region and the African region to land on one of those 2 options as the home for the 3rd ICC. Jake, in terms of your question around the combine, yes, the red versus blue element does emerge at the combine. So that happens in a couple of different ways. And actually, I might have the next slide. No, okay. I'm going to jump ahead a few and then we'll come back to that. So this is what the combine looks like. As I mentioned, it's an 8-week experience for our athletes. It is pretty in-depth. So first week is all welcome and onboarding. This is, athletes reviewing the code of conduct. It's onboarding them to Discord and Google Classroom. It's making sure that they all fill out kind of an entry athlete profile form where they're kind of ranking their skill sets on a variety of different sort of disciplines, everything from scripting to endpoint detection response skills to hard math type stuff. And they rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of these categories at the beginning and the end of the combine. So that's the welcome and onboarding piece. Weeks 2 through 7 are what we call category weeks. And each of those weeks feature 2 lectures. Lectures are 90 to 120 minutes. Essentially, the Monday lecture is typically more kind of on the refresher side, a little bit more kind of beginner moderate. in terms of difficulty level and conceptually. And then the Wednesday evening lecture is much more technically advanced, getting into some deeper topics, more complex processes, things like that. Most of our lectures feature some sort of CTF challenge walkthrough or demonstration of various tools, techniques, things like that. In addition, we have a series of CTF challenges that are delivered to our athletes. And then as part of those CTF challenges, every Thursday for like 8 hours, we open a Zoom environment where athletes are asked to join that Zoom environment for any period of time that they're available. And those sessions are staffed with coaches and mentors. So they can sort of shadow athletes as they're solving challenges. So athletes are put into individual breakout rooms. Coaches will then bounce around. Athletes will share their screens. Coaches will ask them about their understanding on the challenge that they're approaching, the tools they're using, where they're getting stuck, all kinds of things like that. And then they're also asked to submit a CTF challenge write-up assignment every week on one of the challenges that they've solved. So to answer your question, Jake, yes, one of the category weeks is a red versus blue category week. And so we do have lectures that cover red versus blue material. Offensive tactics, defensive tactics, tools, custom tooling, all that kind of stuff. And this year we actually had some of our returning athletes from the recent ICC sort of present on the red versus blue environments and some of the challenges that the US Cyber team faced from the red versus blue competition during the ICC. All right, let's see if I can go back. Okay. For the sake of time, I think I'll skip over the coaches and mentor expectations. As we're rolling through here, just kind of wanted to give you a highlight of some of the bigger events. So the US Cyber Open kickoff, we held this on Thursday, June 1st. This is really kind of a rally for building the momentum, some excitement around the launch of the season programming. So we had about a 3-hour long live streamed, all virtual kickoff events where we featured various speakers, panel discussions, etc. Lots of good fun, really a way for us to kind of just build the interest and celebrate starting a new season. As part of the US Cyber Open itself, we oftentimes get this question. We have simultaneous CTF competitions that are running. So we have both the beginner's game room as well as the competitive CTF. So again, it is all ages. It's open to anyone and everyone. The beginner's game room is truly beginner. One cool fact about the Season 3 US Cyber Open beginner's game room is that all of the challenges that we delivered for the beginner's game room were designed by our Season 2 pipeline program athletes. That was kind of their capstone project for the Season 2 pipeline program. So that was really cool to introduce that aspect of the programming this year. And many of our athletes were stoked to see their challenges go live in the CTFD environment and start to see a lot of the first bloods and the scores and everything else coming around on the challenges that they had designed and delivered. The competitive CTF is certainly much more challenging, technically challenging. There isn't really a whole lot of beginner content in the competitive CTF. And so we do cater to both the beginner's game room folks as well as the competitive CTF for the US Cyber Open. This year, we did offer a Cyber Rush Week program. One of the pieces of feedback we got from our Season 1 and Season 2 athletes is that while they love competing and they love the CTF stuff, part of what they were looking to the US Cyber Games program to do was more on that community side. Creating an environment where they can connect with their fellow athletes, they can get to know some of the coaches and mentors and partners and sponsors a little bit better. So each evening during the US Cyber Open, we did offer an evening event. So we brought in, for example, the Stanford Internet Observatory. They offered a talk on how the landscape around identifying mis and disinformation campaigns on social media has changed with the evolution of some of the natural language processing and large language model tools that are becoming readily available to folks. We had a talk on bug bounties and how to transition your CTF skills or your red versus blue skills into possibly earning some money through bug bounty programs and things like that. So again, this was an effort to create more of a community, provide more opportunities for networking for our athletes. We then get into the combine, as I mentioned, invite only. And I kind of broke down what that actually looked like. The last piece that I didn't really cover is the final week is really designed for athletes to have time for some makeup work. And then our lectures featured talks on careers, leadership, and ethics in cybersecurity for the season 3 programming. Debbie, that's a great question. There a couple of things. I think there are lots of other competitions out there that help athletes prepare for the US Cyber Open and the Combine. Everything from Pico CTF to Cyber Patriot to NCL to CCDC and all of the other ones out there. Certainly, the best kind of prep you can do for cyber competitions is just playing in more cyber competitions. Happy to share some resources in terms of various GitHub repositories or influencers on LinkedIn or YouTube that do a pretty good job. The Hack the Box community has a pretty solid Discord and oftentimes a pretty strong following on their YouTube channel with walkthroughs of various boxes being solved and things like that. But off the top of my head, those would be some of my recommendations for materials platforms. Blue Team Labs Online is another one that's largely free. Yeah, of course. Okay. All right, so the last phase of our season, or not of our season, of kind of the first half of our season, if you will, is draft day. As I mentioned, that'll be on Monday, October 16th. In person and live stream from DC. If any of you are local to that neck of the woods, please feel free to reach out to me and we can make sure you get on the invite list. If you're not local but would still like to tune in, there will be lots of opportunities to do so on the live stream. You can actually find on our website, uscybergames.com, the link to sign up for the live stream event. I put the last sentence on this slide because I think it's important to note that our athletes are evaluated based on lots of different factors. We're not just looking for technical skill. And I think one of the things that we've learned from competing in the ICC for 2 years is that you can have all the technical skill in the world, but like any team-based athletic competition, you really need that teamwork. You need that leadership. You need someone that's almost looking at the competition from like a scrum master kind of program manager type mindset, that's responsible for morale, that's responsible for delegating, that's responsible for making sure that the time is being used effectively. And so we really do look at kind of the full spectrum of what our athletes are bringing to the table when we're identifying the individuals for the US Cyber Team and the Pipeline program. So they are submitting pretty comprehensive applications. It's talking about their backgrounds, other CTFs or cyber competitions they've participated in, any sort of certifications that they may have. But then also, we're asking them to describe an experience where they faced challenges in their life, or maybe a time when they were leading a club or a team or a program of some kind or a group project. Part of the US Cyber Combine is a 30-minute interview for each and every single athlete. For this year's Combine, we had about 120 athletes that we invited into the Combine. And we're now in a 4-week period where each of those 120 athletes are being interviewed by, somewhere between 1 and 3 coaches and mentors. So we're looking at lots of different components when we're identifying athletes for the team and the pipeline. Of course, technical skill is important, but I want to emphasize how important some of the other aspects of what they can bring to the team and the program are. Okay, the pipeline program, as I mentioned, this was started year 1 by one of our original senior technical mentors, Jasmine Jackson. It started as the accelerated training program, and it was kind of reimagined, and it evolved from season 1 to 2 to 3. It's essentially 6 2-week academic rotations led by our coaches and mentors. Each of those 2-week rotations focus on a specific category. So it's similar to that format as the Combine, where there are lectures, there are challenges, there are small group projects, there's individual work, all kinds of things. And the pipeline program was really designed to provide an opportunity to athletes that participated in the Combine that didn't get selected for the team, but showed technical skill, but more importantly, showed enthusiasm and engagement and kind of that thirst for knowledge and willingness to learn and be coached and mentored. And so we wanted to keep them close to the program. They wanted to stay close to the program. And so we designed the pipeline program to kind of fit that need. And the pipeline program kicks off in January, and it runs through May every season. And we work closely with some of our partners like MasterCard and Sands to put on that pipeline program. Those that complete the pipeline program benefit from receiving some training and certification vouchers from our partners like Sands, like Offensive Security and others. But then they also get an automatic invite to the following season's US Cyber Combine. And that kind of gives them not just some familiarity with the coaches and the program itself, but then also a little bit of a head start where they'll jump right into the Combine and be eligible for the following season's team. All right. Any questions on the program, logistics, any of that kind of stuff before I get into the ICC stuff?
Brad, I'll just note we've got about 17 minutes left in the presentation, and I expect there'll be some questions. So adjust however you fit.
Wonderful. And I do see a question from Zach. Zach, I will come back to your question. That's a great question, one we get to all the time. Let me just fly through some of the ICC stuff. I've talked a lot about this already. Ultimately, we are preparing the U.S. Cyber team to compete on behalf of the U.S. at the International Cybersecurity Championships. So the U.S. was fortunate to host the second ever ICC. This happened just about a month ago. August, September, about a month ago in San Diego, California. If you haven't seen any of the videos, many of them are available on our YouTube channel. It was attended by 84 countries represented on 8 different teams. Some countries participate individually, some countries participate as a regional team. And a lot of that comes down to things like funding, their recruitment, and other strategies kind of around recruitment. But this is what the schedule looked like. So in addition to the actual competition itself, we had a small conference and expo. Dr. Manson, I know you were there. Some of you others on the call may have been there as well. Tuesday was the welcome ceremony, which included all of the network connection testing. Everyone was getting into the room, getting set up, finding their spots, all of that. Wednesday was the CTF competition, and there was a hardware component to that. Thursday was the attack and defense competition. And then Friday, the International Cybersecurity Challenge Steering Committee met in the morning to talk about next year's event and start planning for future. And then Friday afternoon, evening, we had the award celebration where the CTF winner, the red versus blue winner, and then overall first, second, and third were identified there. 2 years in a row, Team Europe has taken first place overall. So we are on the hunt to catch up and track them down and take their place on the podium as Team USA. The last thing I'll say is Team USA and Team Canada are the only 2 teams that compete as a single nation. All of the other teams compete as a regional effort, including Oceania, which is Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, Asia, Europe, Africa, all create regional teams and send them to compete at the ICC. Here's a list of some of the things that we have coming up. As I mentioned, US Cyber Open, Combine, in the middle of interviews, moving into draft day. We'll take the season 2 team to the European Cybersecurity Championship. So they ANISA still hosts the ECSC every year. This year is going to be in Norway in October. So we'll take the season 2 team to Norway. We have 2 in-person training camps every year where we bring the team and coaches out to a central location. Last year that was Chicago. And we have some in-person training time, usually over like a long holiday weekend. We host several international scrimmages. Those are virtual, oftentimes live streamed. And then we'll have the ICC next summer, and then next year's European Championship will be in Italy next October 2024. Some of our social media handles, if you're interested in giving us a follow, you please do. And then finally, some recognition for some of our core sponsors that support our program and our vision, and very thankful for their support in what we're doing. So I will leave this screen up and hopefully, yeah, Debbie, great question. So, and then I will come back to you, Zach. I did not forget about your question. So Debbie, our athletes do not get paid, although we also do not expect our athletes to pay for any of their training, any of their travel, any of their lodging. Our sponsors and partners cover all of the travel costs. There might be a meal or two that's not included in their travel, but in terms of airfare, lodging, those kinds of things, it's all covered. They're not expected to cover any of that out of their own pockets. And as well, many of our sponsors and partners, part of their contributions to the program, in addition to monetary, is sometimes in kind. So they're donating range time, they're donating access to their technology, they're donating things like certification vouchers and lots of other stuff. The US Cyber Open is all virtual, so there is no travel costs around that. The challenges are all deployed via CTFD, so as long as you have a modern internet browser and a web connection, you should be able to participate. Zachary, coming back to your question, and I kind of saved this one because I would like to engage some folks in a conversation around how we can better accommodate folks that are learning about the US Cyber Games program after the US Cyber Open has passed. As it has been over years 1 and 2, there has not been an opportunity to kind of jump on board with the program after the US Cyber Open has ended. We're constantly, kind of playing this jigsaw game. We don't want to step on toes with NCL or CCDC or Cyber Patriot or any of the other wonderful competitions that are out there. So we plan our schedule for the season around when those other competitions are happening. And as that is the case, the US Cyber Open happens right at the beginning of June, which is sometimes a hard kind of window of time for many students. They're either just done with school and starting to work, they're maybe traveling, they're interning, they're moving, whatever the case may be. Educators lose access to students over summertime. The short answer is no. There are not currently opportunities to jump into the program after the Open has passed. Now, with that said, we're exploring ways that we can possibly open up some sort of like fall sort of US Cyber Open that could lead to pipeline program eligibility ultimately. The reason why it's hard for us to work with a different timeline over the summer is because once the draft day happens in October, the coaches and mentors are very busy training the US Cyber team, that core team, to compete. There's bi-weekly office hours, there's sessions on custom tooling development, there's all kinds of scrimmages and other kinds of things that are happening, lectures, etc. So currently the idea is to possibly open up some sort of fall open that would allow new participants to qualify for the pipeline program, which would then start in January. But if you have ideas or thoughts, suggestions, I would love to hear from you. My contact information is all on the screen. You're more than welcome to shoot me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Thanks, Brad. What an
Absolutely.
awesome program.
Thank you.
Personally, I really appreciate the kind of community that you're building within your organization, and how students are training other students. And I can see how this is very student oriented, and The mentorship program looks really well done to me. So cheers and congrats, and thanks for kind of having a national cybersecurity team for our country. My main question is, these are difficult things. How competitions work with other competitions can be tricky. And your timeline question, I don't envy you those timeline challenges. I understand all of the constraints you're working within. But if you don't mind, how do you see your competition fitting in with the other competitions? You know, thinking about National Cyber League, CCDC, the NCAE Cyber Games, all of those others that run on kind of a traditional fall, spring. You know, the spring will be the event, fall is training. And knowing that some of the better competitors are in those events, do you see students going directly from one into yours in the second year? How do you see us kind of sharing students and moving students from one event to another? Where do you fit in that from your perspective?
Yeah, great question. You know, our opinion is kind of the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. You know, the more competitions that are out there, the more competitions that individuals are participating in, the better off we all are. One of the reasons we try to deconflict our season timeline with many of the other competitions is because 99% of our athletes are participating in all of the other ones, and ones that I've never even heard of. This is their hobby. And kind of going back to the fusion of esports and athletics, when we are creating a season, it is a year-long season. And part of that year-long season is US Cyber Games specific learning, training, development, team building, etc. And part of that is engaging with the community that we have developed with the US Cyber Games to create a team to go compete in fill in the blank CTF. You know, we just had quite a few of our combine athletes form several teams that competed in George Mason's Patriot CTF this past weekend. Most of our athletes are participating in NCL. Those athletes that are attending CAE schools or other college universities, maybe they're participating in the CAE Cyber Games, maybe they're participating in Department of Energy's Cyberforce competition, and lots of others. In fact, in our Discord, we actually have a whole channel for our athletes to talk about other upcoming CTFs or cyber competitions. And if somebody is needing a team to be on, or somebody wants to put together a team, we encourage all of that kind of communication within the program itself. And oftentimes our coaches are also getting involved in that. Our CTF coach, Jacob Elliott, participated with a couple of our athletes in the Patriot CTF this past weekend. Sorry, did someone have a question? So I guess to answer your question, you know, the deconflicting is important to us because we are hoping that our athletes are gaining the experience from participating in all of these other competitions. You know, each of them are going to use a different platform. Each of them are going to have different challenge developers. Each of them are going to have different tested skills, different size teams, different, you know, hiccups, hurdles, struggles, things like that. And ultimately that's good for the US Cyber team to have as much experience under their belt as possible.
That sounds great. Now I'll save this conversation for a different venue, but perhaps the competition organizers can create a pipeline into your event where highly recommended students from different competitions bypass the open and go directly to the combine or something to that event.
Yeah, I would love to engage in those kind of discussions. And in fact, one of the things, and we've discussed this a little bit with our season 3 coaches, is how we work with folks like CAE Cyber Games, NCL, CCDC, the organizers of those competitions, to, you know, identify top talent across the board and make recommendations for competing in the other competitions and things like that. So far, our collaborations haven't quite gone that far. I would love for them to go in that direction. We have had some kind of panels where we've brought in representatives from lots of other competitions to speak about their competitions, their target demographic, the types of challenges, how to get involved, those kinds of things. But certainly interested in taking that next step, exactly as kind of you alluded to, in terms of how we can maybe better refer athletes or set up formal kind of, hey, you did this, now check this out sort of deal. It'd be great.
Well, we're approaching the end of the hour. I just want to say thanks for the great presentation, and thanks for you and your team and all the great work you've been doing. Most of the competitions have a niche, and you can see that not only do you have a niche, but you really have a really nice program of student development and community building that allows you to really fill that niche and go beyond your niche, and that's really admirable. So thanks for the great presentation, and thanks to you and your team for everything you've been doing for the cybersecurity competition environment.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And congratulations to you all as well. And we couldn't do this without the interest that many of you have worked so hard to generate and build so much kind of enthusiasm around cyber competitions in general. So really look forward to future collaborations. Please don't be shy to reach out to me. I appreciate you letting me come and speak to you all today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks again, Brad. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.